Let's talk about writing, and let's talk about writing on our holidays. I've been travelling for a couple of weeks with family. We're in Nottingham in central England at the moment. We've been up in Edinburgh for a week. We've had a week on the coast at a beautiful seaside town, which is my happy place, or one of my few most happy places, Whitby on the northeast coast of England, which is absolutely gorgeous. Any time of the year. Little promotion for Whitby Tourist Board. But I've been trying to write regularly on the holiday, and it's quite difficult because there are 5 of us as adults travelling together, often visiting museums or coffee shops, going down to the beach or being at the harbour, going on a few tours in the evening and sometimes during the day in the different cities we've been visiting. But part of the issue is carving out the time to say, I need to write today for my mental health as much as for potential commercial productivity, and saying to other people in the group, look, I'm going to do this for this block of time. I'm going to go to a coffee shop, or I'm going to sit on a bench in a park, and I'm going to dedicate my time to this thing which is important. And at this time of the year, we're now in the summer, it can be difficult. And I wanted to discuss with you some of the ways that I've been managing to carve out time. For example, in the same way that this is now early in the morning, most of the house is in the process of getting up before we go out in a couple of hours to have a look around the city centre. I'm up early and I'm just sitting in the living room of the Airbnb that we've rented just to record a video. And what I will also be doing this afternoon, because I've planned that in my diary, is I'll take one of my spiral bound notebooks that I've been carrying with me these last few days on this particular trip, because we're checking in at home every week for a couple of days and then heading off again around different parts of the country. One of the things I've been doing is grabbing my spiral notebook and saying, I'm going to create 500 or 600 words, and giving myself a cup of coffee, either at home in whichever building we're in, or at a coffee shop or a tea house somewhere on the route, and taking that time. I've written on the train several times in the last few weeks. I haven't managed to write on a bus. I always find travelling on a bus or a coach quite a difficult place to write. It's not just because of the movement of the vehicle, which is much more unstable than on the train. It's because you have so little space between you and the seat in front of you, where you want to get on with things, but it's just not so comfortable. And also, I don't have a big table in front of me, obviously on the coach, but there's not that much space between one passenger and the next. So there's not that much flexibility for me to write. I'm a big, tall man, so I need space. What do you need so that you can write? And have you identified that? Because sometimes we don't even think consciously about the needs we have to be in our author mode, to be in, well, I guess maybe even in plotting mode. This is a real live video. I'm just going to close the door because somebody in the house is using a hairdryer. And of course, they've got no idea that I'm downstairs recording a video. And indeed, why should they? Because our lives as writers sometimes are different from those of our partners or our family and friends that we travel with. No, you have to, when you travel, I think, have like a go bag. I've done various EDC bags or conversations about things that are like the tools or the instruments that you and I have as the get ready kit, and off we go. And basically for me, this is mine. This isn't not an EDC video. This is me saying, look, I have a bag. It's got my laptop in it. I've got a little notebook. another one with cash in, and a bunch of pens. They're not really that important. A bunch of pens here, just, you've seen lots of these in my different videos, so I've got those with me. There's far more pens than a man needs when he's out and about travelling. One pen is enough. But you have to have the resources, physical resources, to allow you to write. I've got a spiral bound notebook in the rucksack upstairs in the bedroom, in this place we checked into. And I've been managing, on average, about 400 words a day so far in these first 2 weeks. How does that work out? There have been days where I've done absolutely zero. There have been days where I've managed 1,000 words, but I think my average is between 400 and 500 words a day. And I'm okay with that. What I've noticed is that if I have a couple of days where I haven't written, I get anxious. I worry that I'm not going to write that day. And that sometimes is what spurs me on to say, look, you enjoy these next few shops, or you go to that museum, I've already visited that one. I will put myself in a coffee shop and get on with the writing process. I'm trying to think where I was a couple of days ago. I know, we were getting ready to pack up and leave, and we got everything out of the house on time for the 10 o'clock departure before the cleaners arrived, but there was a little sun-trapped patio outside with some benches and a couple of chairs, and I sat there with all the suitcases while friends and family went for final bits of shopping before we caught a bus and then a train to the next town. But I managed to do some characterization pages. I managed to work on something I hadn't considered before, which is in building the depth of characters for my stories, I realised that although we know where the main protagonist lives, I hadn't given consideration specifically to where some of the other people that he has his working and social life activity with, I hadn't said where they live. In my mind I'd said, and this is just in first stage fast drafting, I'd said that one of his sergeants and that man's wife lived in such and such a neighbourhood, that a junior detective lives with her parents in XYZ neighbourhood, and that one of the uniform officers, a sergeant, lives in such and such a place. But I hadn't pinned it down. So yesterday or that day I was thinking with the map, okay, I'm going to put this person in this colonia or neighbourhood, and why I'm going to do that. I had to think about what it was that allowed me to say, this is their neighbourhood. Had they moved there, had they grown up there, and then joined the police perhaps after university or college before they became beat officers and then moved into the detective team. But I had to work that out, and I did that in an hour whilst I was guarding the luggage and the others were out and about doing final bits and bats of shopping. A few days ago we were in a town called Hebden Bridge, which is a beautiful small community, but it's very much a place for creative, artistic, thoughtful, self-employed people. It's got a huge artisan population. And whilst the others nipped into a local pub, I sat by a bridge that was built in 1600, a gorgeous stone bridge, Hebden Bridge, that flows across, that spans the river, of the little river that runs through the small town. And I sat on a bench there with my notebook, and which fountain pen was it? I used this one, which is my Bauer, I think it's called a Bauer 388. If I remember it, I'll put it in the comments. But I sat there on a busy day, people all around me drinking beer, kids throwing bread to the ducks in the stream, a couple of musicians playing guitars together and just riffing on the other side of the river. And I managed a lot of work thinking about aspects of the characterization that I spoke about from the couple of days previously. But I realised that my main character is the only character in the book who was not born in Mexico City. And that was an amazing moment in which I suddenly thought, he is the outsider in this city. And that's one of the reasons that he looks at day-to-day life in Mexico City slightly differently, or with a different pair of eyes, than his colleagues. And that came out of 40 minutes, 50 minutes, sitting in a busy little town, observing life going on around me, and adding to some of the characterization and where people lived notes from a few days before. So this is about stealing time, about finding opportunities when you are busy, when you're with other people, to satisfy that great need that you and I have as, let's just start with the word creative people, because this video doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be a writer, but I think in the sense that you are creative and thoughtful and reflective about what you see, what you notice, how you engage with life, this might be a useful thing. You have a notebook, you put some things down in your notebooks that will support you in your creative goals and your creative intentions. But of course, what they're doing is they are calming you down. Like I've said, I get agitated if I don't have that creative opportunity. I know, for example, that because I've recorded a video this morning, I can be much more present in the I can be much more present in the other activities that I have with family today, because the creative process for the day has been done, it's happened, and I can enjoy the other hours of the day from a much more engaged perspective. So what else can we do to manage that creative need, that urge to produce, to think about, to add to our own aesthetic experience and the needs that we have for that to be around us during the day? I think one of the biggest things is actually self-trust, because we know that we have this need that needs to be let out, that needs to be recognized, that needs us to give our time and our attention to. And I think a little bit of planning is good. I knew when I went to sleep last night that one of the things I wanted to do this morning was be up a little bit early and do some writing. The writing can happen in a little while, but I realized as I was about to start writing that I wanted to talk about this whole process of writing whilst on holiday and allocating time and attention to our creative processes. The other is to talk about it with your family and friends. If you live alone, that isn't necessarily the issue. If you're traveling on your own, that isn't a thing. But if you are traveling with other people and in your day-to-day life, you need to make time for this creativity and for this expression of your artistic or reflective side, then talk about it. I'm sure that when we have breakfast together, the five of us, in an hour or so, I will mention the fact that I've recorded a video, or somebody will say, oh, were you on the phone downstairs? And I'll say, no, I've just been catching up with a video before we all go into town together. Make the time for it. Talk to those around you about your need to have that opportunity, that time for self-expression in whatever way it is, if it's digital or, I've forgotten the word for non-digital, analog, thank you, or whether it is the process of going into your garden shed or your studio space or your table under the stairs and giving yourself the time that you need to be the creative soul, to be the creative personality that is just a part of who you are, making you the person that you enjoy being, but because you give yourself that time for yourself. I hope that's helped. It's just allowed me to talk through some of the ideas and the methods I'm using to cope with not being in one place for more than a few days at a time for these few weeks of travelling around the country, and knowing that by blocking out little bits of time every day or every other day, I am supporting myself and allowing myself to then engage with all the other things in the diary.